about bridging the gap between brain science and everyday parenting challenges. Today, I am thrilled to welcome back Dr. Sonali Dasgupta for our 5th episode together. Our previous conversations have explored various aspects of childhood development and education, and today we are tackling something that resonates with every parent and educator, which is managing big feelings. So whether you're a parent dealing with tears over homework or an educator navigating classroom emotions, understanding these intense feelings is key to helping our children develop emotional resilience. Sonali, as a STEM expert, you bring such valuable insights to this discussion, especially in how these big emotions play out in learning environments. But before we dive into our conversation today, would you please introduce yourself to our viewers and also mention the work you do with STEM Monsters Education?
Thank you so much, Blanka. Happy New Year to all our audiences. And I'm equally thrilled to be back here with the 5th episode, which also goes on to show that how much appreciation we have received over these series of talks. And it is heartening to see that the conversations have actually made real life impact on all of you. So I'm Dr. Sonali Dasgupta, a research scientist turned educator, and I run a venture called STEM Monsters Education Platform. We work with schools to implement a hands-on STEM program that fosters interdisciplinary innovation by focusing on things like design thinking and first principles approach to learning. Now, while we are doing hands-on education where children are doing things and working in groups, it is very, and also at home when children are normal, that children have meltdowns and children have big emotions. So today's session is all about managing these big feelings and meltdowns. Now, these are normal. Meltdowns happen to all of us. Even when we were children, we have had, I'm sure we have had emotions overwhelm us. So however, they can be challenging for both the children and the adults who support them. And understanding how to approach this is crucial for building emotional resilience in today's times when digital platform and everything seems to be taking over, AI seems to be taking over every aspect of it. So having that emotional resilience is crucial for our children and their emotional intelligence. So with that, before we dive into the feeling of what can be done about big feelings, let's start from the very basic. So being a researcher, I go to the why of everything. So Blanka, I think let's start off with why is it that children have big feelings? That's the first key to understanding how to deal with them.
Yes, exactly. And I love that you mentioned going back to the why, because I think that's what drives us as people who are like into the science behind things. So I love that you asked that. And with my fascination in neuroscience, I'm very happy to give our viewers a very brief explanation on why meltdowns happen, why we experience such intense emotions, and why that might set off children and parents on a wrong track. So first thing is that just very briefly about the brain. So our brain is structured into different parts, and the part up here, which is called the prefrontal cortex, is our thinking brain. That's the most newly developed part of the brain, evolutionarily speaking. And then we have the lower layers, which are part of the limbic system, which is a more ancient part of our brain. And then there's the brainstem, which controls all of our bodily functions without our conscious awareness, right? So speaking of the prefrontal cortex again, so that's the thinking brain, and then the limbic system, which is responsible for our emotions. When a child is first born, their brain is very immature, right? And the prefrontal cortex actually continues on developing into our mid-20s. So, and that's the prefrontal cortex is what is responsible for logical thinking, for reasoning, for impulse control, meaning like I don't act on my impulses when I'm feeling the urge to my sibling, for example. Whereas the limbic system, which is the more primitive part of the brain sitting below the prefrontal cortex, is what drives our impulses, drives our emotions. It is responsible for our survival. So our viewers might have heard about a fight, flight, or freeze response, which is driven by our limbic system, and which is a very important response from our brain because that's what protects us from danger. So it really, once it's turned on, it actually turns off the prefrontal cortex, which means that when a child is in that heightened emotional state, they don't have the ability to access their thinking brain because their whole brain and body has been overtaken by their limbic system. So that's why it's really hard for us to control our emotions when we're in that very heightened state. And some additional information is that usually impulse control starts to develop between the ages of 5 to 7. That means that you can't really expect a 5-year-old to stop behaving or stop having the meltdown in the middle of the supermarket. You actually have to help them. So we'll get into the how we do that part later on. And then and then also there's an intense brain remodeling going on between the ages of 11 to 13, which, you know, those preteen years seem very challenging.
Nightmare.
Exactly. And they're not. So the important message is that the child or the preteen is not in control of their behavior when this happens.
It's actually fascinating when you break it down like that, because for years, I think almost all the parents would have heard of the troublesome twos. And when you break it down like that, where you say that the children throw a tantrum when they are 2 to 3 years old, 5 years old, it is not really that they want to throw a tantrum. It is something they are unable to control. And that is the place where we as adults come in. And it's also very interesting. I'm sure we have a lot of parents who are parents to teenagers, and the preteen think about my video keeps going off for a while. I'm not sure why.
That's okay.
Yeah, but also for the preteen years, that you break it down into realizing that some of the actions that we do are part of our thinking brain, and the other is the emotional brain. Logic versus emotion, how real it is, and where do we as adults need to step in so that we can help the child control their emotion part of the brain, which is not really something they can do on their own because the connections are still getting built.
No, exactly as you put it. I love that you put it, that they can't control it. And this is something that we learn over time. And we learn over experiencing it from other humans. So that's why the parent and the educator's role is crucial in this aspect, because you're basically borrowing their brain, their calm, in order to learn how to do that yourself on your own later in life. And something that I'm really fascinated by is Dr. Stuart Shanker's work on self-regulation. So we talk a lot about self-control, right? So, you need to learn more self-control in order to, stop the behavior. And the way he puts it is that he's done extensive work on stress, and he's basically grouped thousands of different stressors into 5 main groups. And these are biological stressors, meaning that, you have some bodily urge, like maybe you're thirsty, you're hungry, you need to use the bathroom, for example. So these biological stressors. Then there is cognitive stressors. Let's say this, everyone struggles with math sometimes, maybe not everyone, but some of us do. Then there's the social and emotional and the prosocial stressors. So if we look at it from this viewpoint, that, the behavior, I always try to tell parents to look at the behavior as a means of communication, right? So the child is not intentionally being bad, okay? There's always something underneath, and it's our responsibility as parents and educators to identify what's going on, and maybe there is something that we can then change or adapt for the child to feel more okay in their body.
True.
Does that make sense?
I mean, I will probably stop you there, where children are not trying to be bad, except when they're preteens and they're trying to bother you to get you to react. And
but that's also, it might just be, and just
for need of attention, the way I look at it. need for attention, need
A need for
for
attention.
security, need for feeling, yes, I'm heard. And we'll not talk
Validated,
about the teenage brain because it's different brains. And we, every episode, I think we break into the teenage brain versus the child brain. But it's important, and that's what we're talking about today, that the stage of the brain development is different for different age groups of children, and how we tackle with that is also very, very different. So there is no one size fits all. If you have a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old, how you would deal with that child versus the 14-year-old is going to be very, very different. Now, at the same time, it is also important that there are certain things we need to keep in mind as adults who are supposed to be in control of their emotions to deal with a situation where the child's emotion is out of control. So understand the why. Now let's move on to the how. We understand that their response, if it is a tantrum, if it is unruly behavior, whatever be the case, if it is disrespect, is because of their need to communicate due to a stress, which could be any of the 5 stresses that you talked about. It could be cognitive, it could be biological, it could be social. And so let's move on to the how. Once we have identified that this is a reaction to the stress, how do we go about helping them?
Before we jump into that, I just wanted to mention that it's not always, because yes, we mentioned the main stressors and that those influence the behavior, right? And at the same time, it's also the person's life experience. So if they've never experienced how to do this on their own, how can I regulate myself when I'm feeling trouble, when I have a fallout with my friends, right? How can I overcome these intense emotions that I'm feeling? So if a person's never experienced that independent of their age, they'll still struggle to self-regulate.
Yes.
So apart from the stressors, I just wanted to add that on.
I'm glad you did that, because sometimes we believe, see, it's all a matter of habit as well. It's all something that you practice over time, and then it becomes part of who you are or your personality. So I'm so glad you mentioned naturally with. We are not born with self-regulation. We are not born with self-control. It is something we gain over time with the help from others. And that's where our role as educators comes in, or our role as parents comes in, when we witness a certain kind of behavior that is probably unruly or unwanted in certain scenarios. So would you like to move on then to what could be the few steps we can take, and then we can move on from there in the discussion?
Exactly. Yes, I'd love that. So first, when you're in a situation with your child who's in emotional distress, what can you do as a parent at home? Or even, same applies to an educator in a school setting.
Sure.
But the first thing is to welcome the feelings. Welcome them, because when your child is experiencing something, you want to make sure that their experience is valid, right? People might have heard a lot about you need to validate their emotions, which is true to a certain extent, but not right in the beginning. So first, you're just present, you welcome them. Then the second step is co-regulation, which we can go into detail on what co-regulation means and how we can do it. And then we can dive into like how we do that, and also processing the emotions. So Sonali, can you talk to us a little bit about how you would do this in a classroom setting? How can you welcome the kids in a classroom?
Yeah, so before I give, because we are talking about students, before I answer that question, and I will bounce the question back to you. So why don't we start off with so sometimes when we say welcome the feelings, we hear a lot about, oh, I realize you're sad, and we go on into a monologue for a minute to tell the child, yes, I understand you are sad, but the child doesn't care. So how do we effectively welcome the feeling or validate the feeling for the child? Let's understand that first, and then we move on to the classroom scenario, which can be little different in how you would do the same thing.
Yeah. So What I mean by welcoming emotions is we welcome the upset, the tears. So avoid saying things like, oh, don't be upset, don't cry over this and this. There's no need to cry over, breaking your toast in half or not having the mug or the plastic
to validate
you wanted. So avoid saying anything like this. So when emotions are high, as I mentioned earlier about the brain science, there's no logic. Absolutely no logic. So avoid reasoning, avoid explaining, avoid talking. So you don't have to talk. You have to be there at present and just be there. You don't necessarily have to say things. You can empathize with them in the moment and maybe say some soothing sound, imitate some soothing sounds that you try to match their emotional state. And why this is important is because it really teaches our kids that it's okay to have any kind of feelings. And we want that. We want their experiences to feel valid. Because when we don't allow them to feel, or when we try and jump in to fix things, because, as parents, you're like, it's hard to see our kids struggling. So we have this intense...
We're solutionizing immediately, aren't we?
Exactly.
I call it solutionizing mode.
Yeah, so we have this intense urge to jump in and fix things. And what this tells kids is that you need to stop feeling this way. And your feelings are an emergency. And that will, we talked about the practicing and through experience, that will set them off the wrong path, because then their brains learn that, oh, when I'm feeling like this, oh, it's an emergency. And that will set off their fight or flight response. Always. And we don't want that, because we want them to notice how they're feeling, like eventually, obviously, and also to be able to regulate themselves.
I love the fact that, actually, sorry to cut you off there, but I want to reiterate what you just said, which is you don't necessarily need to say something. And that holds valid whether at home or in school. You don't need to say, oh, I see you are angry. Yes, maybe with some children you do, but that is not the point. The point is, whatever you do, you need to only make sure that the children or the students, in case of a classroom, realize that you understand where they are in their emotional stage.
Yeah. Yes, so exactly. It's that understanding, that the feeling of being heard and understood is what we're doing in this first step.
First stage, yeah.
Yeah. So going back to the classroom setting.
Yeah,
so
okay, my turn.
How would you do this part in a classroom, Sonali?
And my video is completely not for today. But yeah, so going back to a classroom, usually what happens is, let's say you come into a class and everybody is very high on energy, which is also part of unruly behavior. You expect them to listen to you. So how do you get around to listening to them? And here it is not the so we're talking of slightly older kids, let's say, and I do want to break it down into younger kids and older kids, because the approach would be different. So let's say it's an older kid, a classroom of older kids, and they're all in their own zone. They are in no mood to listen to you, but you do have a class to take and you do have something to do. So I think with the older kids, the first thing, as you very rightly said, it's not necessary to start shouting, oh, get back to your seats, oh, get back, because the louder you shout, the louder they will shout. That's scenario one. Scenario two is you shout and they look at it as authoritarian, which we discussed again last time, and they lose all respect for you. So usually what I see has works very well. And if you read as well, you realize that you walk in and you see a very unruly class. You don't need to say anything, but you make your presence felt, which is when they will obviously quieten down, calm down, or anything. And then you say, I understand that we have a lot of energy in this classroom today. So let's see how we can work to utilize that energy together. And then you move on to devise things. You don't need to come into the classroom and say, why are you all so excited? Because then you are questioning their very essence of how they're behaving. That is not the point. There is no logic, as you very rightly said.
And also, if I may jump in here, you're making them feel bad for feeling in a certain way, and they might have had a fantastic break and always, transitioning.
Or somebody's birthday, they must have just celebrated somebody's birthday and they're still in that mood, so it's okay. And so that's number one. And I think it all boils, and if it's younger kids, for example, and we'll talk about the work of self-regulation in a bit. So I don't want to put it into the first step. The first step is just understand what the situation is and pause.
Yeah.
Pause yourself before pausing the other person. And a person in this case would be a child or a student.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath, understand the situation, assimilate that, and then react. Don't become impulsive because somebody else is impulsive.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And I think you've sort of touched on co-regulation already, which would be the following step,
Similar,
right?
yes.
And just to give our viewers a bit of background about co-regulation is so we basically, when we co-regulate with someone, is that we lend them our calm so they can calm themselves. And the way, a bit of a science behind it is that we all our brains have mirror neurons, which are actually so basically what they're on the constant lookout to communicate,
to mimic what they're feeling.
Yes, to communicate with the other person's mirror neurons, and they mimic, as you were saying, yes, they mimic what the other person is expressing, right? So if we're calm as a parent or an educator, if we maintain our calm, that really helps the child, the teenager, to come back to our calm more quickly. So that's basically regulation.
You know why I find this so interesting? It's because almost every second mom, as mothers of a newborn, I think at least others who are there, I'm sure they realize when they keep telling themselves when the children were babies that babies pick up on your emotions. If you are stressed, the baby will feel stressed. You will not be able to put your baby to sleep if you are not calm. And it's just so strange that we forget that as the babies grow into children or toddlers, and then when they are impulsive, we start becoming impulsive, and we forget that the reason how they're able to pick up on your emotions is the same way they're able to pick up on your emotions when they're older as well.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that we forget, and I think that's really interesting because, as you know, as children grow and develop, and you can have like insanely interesting conversations with a 3-year-old about dinosaurs.
Yes.
They know so many facts about dinosaurs, and then you sort of have this, you know, like, I'm able to have a conversation with them about
why don't they understand
why dinosaurs got extinct, and then then they're 2 minutes later they're on the floor having the biggest meltdown ever, and then sort of it feels so you can't really blame parents for not being able to do this, because in some ways their children are developing really quickly, but just as a reminder, their brains aren't developing as fast. I mean, different areas of the brain are, of course. Their emotion, we learned this, and even as adults, there are times when you're taken over by your emotions, right? So imagine a 4-year-old or a teenager who's experiencing all that at the same, all of those hormones.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen parents at restaurants where they are really angry with a 4-year-old for shouting that I'm hungry. And the fact is, no, you have to behave. This is a restaurant. Logic doesn't work. Figure out, and I think that brings us to the third part of the conversation, or third step of the conversation. You have understood what's happening. You have taken steps to co-regulate, calm yourself, and then you process. And so the process is the part where you then figure out ways as an adult, to take steps, knowing your child or knowing your students, what would help them to control their emotions. And when I say control, take it with a pinch of salt. It's not really control. It's essentially trying to calm them down so that they can understand their emotions. That doesn't happen at the first step. That has to happen at the last step.
It does. And certainly, I love that you bring this up, because one thing is that we don't need to get rid of the emotions, because they're there to signal to us that, okay, something happened and that I need to learn how to deal with it. So emotions are there to protect us, and we have to take account of what we're feeling. And the only way to do that is by letting them come. You let them come and you sit with the emotion, and then the emotion will pass. So that's, I think, as a parent, I think when you're sitting in that moment with your child screaming at you and you're trying to stay calm, one thing you could keep telling yourself is that this moment will pass, this emotion will pass, we'll get through it, and then we'll start over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I like the thing. I mean, even in the classroom situation, for example, and I was just thinking about it. So when we say process, it's not sitting with the child with the emotion does not necessarily mean physically sit down. It is also about acknowledging and doing something about it. So let's say if it's in the classroom and something happens, and there are times when there is an unruly child, and especially for the younger ones. And what you do in that case is, okay, the child is not behaving as they want to, they are throwing a tantrum, they are disturbing others. You don't point out and say, leave the classroom. And we talked about punishments. We have already covered how detrimental they are to the development of a child's emotional resilience. So we'll not cover that again. But as an active suggestion or an active advice of how you could deal with that is, first, calm yourself that you don't ask them to get out of the class. That's number one. Number two is you tell that without pointing fingers, you tell that, yes, I understand that this particular topic may not be as interesting for some of you, or maybe it's too easy for some of you. So that's the part where you identify the trigger of why they are behaving in that certain manner. And the third, where you process, you then do something where the child can control their feelings. So especially with the younger ones, getting them engaged to become your assistant teacher, to become teacher for the class, to become the leader is one of the most effective ways, where then once the child realizes that, yes, maybe it was because of getting attention, maybe it was boring. In any of the scenarios, the moment you say, why don't you help me out on this to help your classmates master this topic, immediately their brain starts getting distracted and moving towards another task at hand. So the reason why they were behaving in a certain way kind of takes the back seat, and the brain starts focusing on something else. So engage them or give them accountability as they get older, that this is what is happening, and I appreciate, as we discussed, I appreciate that you've had a long day, or we appreciate you had a very exciting day. Let's see if we can utilize them, get them moving, do a physical thing. Every step that you take to process the emotion, acknowledge, accept it, is towards helping them regulate their emotion and moving out of that moving out of that uncontrollable situation.
Yes. And I just wanted to add, I mean, all of this is wonderful, Sonali, and I think it's really helpful for our educators out there. And I just wanted to say that there are certain situations when you don't have the time or the means to help the child process their emotions. And that's okay. I just wanted to say that you don't have to do this every single time, because there are some times when you're, maybe it's the morning, maybe it's the morning rush, and you do have to get out of the house because you do have an important meeting at work that you must not be late, and you have time limitations.
Sure.
And just one tip, which is my mentor's suggestion is
pass down the generation of mentors.
Exactly. It's Dr. Laura Markham, and she calls it emotional backpack. So you sort of go around, so it's a metaphorical backpack, obviously, but you sort of shove your emotions into it throughout the day when you don't have the time to process them in real time. And then at the end of the day, or maybe when kids go home from school, their emotional backpack gets full, and that's when they're like fidgety, whiny, picking fights, just nudging their sibling, like just trying to get rid of it. And then two ways to empty the emotional backpack in a better way is through either crying. So if they're able to cry, that's really good. Have you ever had that, Sonali, when you just had a good
my daughter does it almost every time. So I don't do it, and I don't know how she picked it up, and I'm so glad she has. But there are days when she would come and tell me, you know what, I don't know, Mama, but I'm feeling very frustrated. Can I have a cry in with you?
Yeah,
and
I love
it sounds weird at this point, but picked it up. And trust me, and this is for every parent out there, if your child can tell you that they're feeling unhappy, angry, frustrated, and can tell you that this is how I'm feeling and I want to let it out, let them let it out. Sometimes they'll say, I just want to go for a run. That's the adult's way of releasing stress. For your child, if they don't realize it, let them do it. Do a pillow fight.
Exactly.
Because adrenaline takes over.
The other thing, what I wanted to touch on is, so the other way to empty the emotional backpack apart from crying is through laughter. So I have two very physical boys, and they prefer the laughter rather than the crying. And especially my older one, he's very physical, and he needs that wrestling, that we jump on the bed and then we have
energy, that's adrenaline, the high energy.
And through that laughter, he's able to let go of and empty his emotional backpack.
We have those kind of things. So that's what, it doesn't have to be the same solution every single time. I mean, even we get bored, right? You don't have to say come cry, or you don't have to say come do a pillow fight, but do what seems right for that time. So the idea is just acknowledge and let them let it out. That's all.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
But don't try to put logic. That I think I want to underline again. Don't try to put logic, because logic doesn't work. Biologically, logic centers are shut down.
Exactly. So, yes, that is super important to remember. And even for teenage, so that's even with older kids, even if you're arguing with your spouse, not when the emotions are high, because there's no logic even there.
As they say, don't make a decision when you're angry or sad or frustrated. Just wait.
Yes. So we've reached we've gone a bit over time. Just wanted to put the stage up for any listener questions. So just drop them in the comments if you have any questions. And in the meantime, I just wanted to share something very exciting that's happening this month. So I have a special offer this month. So if there are any parents out there feeling like they might want to explore what parent coaching is, or are in the middle of some tricky situations with their children, I am offering free taster sessions. So just drop me a message on LinkedIn, and I would be more than happy to have a conversation with you. And Sonali, I think you have something exciting coming up as well.
Yes, we do. But before that, I would tell all the parents, don't miss this opportunity. Blanka is great. When I have issues with my teenage daughter, I just say, this is happening and I don't know how to process it. And she's the calmest person you will ever meet. And she will put things in perspective for you. So take up this offer. I'm sure you're not going to resent the 30 odd minutes, 15 odd minutes, whatever you spend with her. That's one. And the other is the exciting news from my end, which is on 22nd and 23rd of February, STEM Monsters is hosting its 4th edition of the online STEM Symposium, this is open to students all across the globe. We have schools participating from Canada, Singapore, all across India and UK. So please make sure that if your child is into sciences, they love experimenting, this is a fantastic opportunity for them to not just learn from peers, get feedback from experts, but also for them to showcase and gain confidence on sharing what they know on a bigger platform. The event is called STEM Explore. Just go to STEM Monsters or drop me a note on LinkedIn, and I'll be more than happy to share the link with you. It's in the online mode, so anybody from anywhere can join in. It's going to be another exciting thing. So we are really, really looking forward to that.
Yes, if you've got any children who are interested in science and technology, then make sure to hop over and check out Sonali's symposium. Yes. And is there an age range that you...
This starts for any child above the age of 8 to 9 years. So it's from grades 4 all the way to K-12. There are 3 different events that are there for them. So thank you for asking that question. But yes, probably not your 5-year-old, but if you have a 10-year-old or a preteen who doesn't want to study, I think they will still want to be part of this event. So yes, it's open to everybody above 9 years of age.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. My older son is 8, so I think maybe we'll wait for next year. But he's really into experimenting, so I think he'll love it.
Awesome. So I look forward to seeing him. And we don't seem to have any comments right now,
Yes.
but even if you have not managed to join us here, do urge you to go check out the recording on our YouTube channel, drop in a question, connect with us on LinkedIn for anything that you may want answers to. And before we end, I do want to leave you with I think one of the most exciting, important topics as well for our next episode, and that's managing screen times. So we know every parent struggles with managing screen time for their children, even adults struggle for that matter, but will not give solutions for adults. You go figure that out. We will offer advice and suggestions on how you can do that without raising a storm in the house in the next month's episode.
Yes, I think this will be super valuable for everyone out there, because being a parent today is not easy at all. So
hop over and follow us on our YouTube channel, Nurturing Minds. Follow Dr. Blanka or I on our LinkedIn profiles. Send us an invite. We would love to engage with you more, and do share your comment and feedback.
Yes, and if you have any questions to us or any topic ideas, make sure to message either Sonali or me, or pop them in the comments below.
Yes, so the podcast is for you. So please let us know how you find it. Drop a feedback, anything that works for you, suggestions to improve. So until next month,
we'll see you.
See you and take care.
Bye.